Being a police officer for about 3 years has given me many interesting and unusual experiences. One day I received a very strange call that was different from anything I had ever encountered before. The call was from a man who said someone was breaking into his house. I immediately turned around and drove to his address. His house was located deep in the woods, far from any other homes. I thought that if someone was breaking into his house, it had to be someone who knew the area well. When I arrived, I noticed that the windows were shattered and the door was broken. I got out of my car and carefully walked towards the house. I pulled out my gun and called out, "Police, come out with your hands up." Suddenly, I heard a man shout, thank God, it almost got me." The voice belonged to an elderly gentleman, the owner of the house. He was trembling and looked very scared, so I quickly went over to him and asked if there was anyone else inside the house. He assured me that he was alone. I then asked if the burglars were still around. To my surprise, he said it wasn't a burglar at all. "The demon," he cried, "it almost got me." His words left me puzzled and curious. I knew I had to investigate further, but I also had to make sure the man was safe. This was turning out to be a call unlike any other I had ever responded to. I instructed him to stay inside the patrol car, a safe place, while I carefully explored the house. Every room was checked, but there were no signs of anyone lingering inside. Outside, I circled the perimeter, examining the damage to the doors and windows. They were all smashed in, but there was no trace of the culprit, so I motioned for the old man to join me outside. Sitting together, I advised him to take deep breaths to calm his nerves. Clear thinking was crucial for us to figure out what had happened. To my surprise, the man chuckled and dismissed the idea of a mere criminal. "It's the demon," he declared with conviction. He explained that a sinister entity dwelled in the woods behind his home. Occasionally it would emerge, peering out from among the trees before vanishing into the shadows. Recently it had grown bolder, even attempting to harm him. As he described the creature, pale skin, large black eyes, a gaping mouth, tall and thin, moving on all fours, I struggled to reconcile the old man's words with reality. While he seemed rational enough, the notion of a demonic presence lurking in the woods seemed far-fetched, yet the damage to his home couldn't be ignored. Was it possible that something otherworldly was at play? As I saw it, someone had tried to harm the old man, and maybe in the darkness he mistook them for a demon. When people are stressed, they often remember things wrong, and that might be what happened here. It could also be someone wearing a mask to hide who they are. But whatever it was, I couldn't leave the old man alone in case he was attacked again. I asked if he had somewhere else to stay, but he refused. "I'm going to be the one to stop this demon," he insisted. "I want to see the fear in its eyes when it knows it's done for." I didn't want to go, but I had another call to attend to. About a week later, I checked in on him. His windows and doors were fixed, and he seemed okay. One night, I got a call about someone trying to break into a house. When I saw the address, it was the old man's place. I turned on my lights and sirens and rushed there. When I got there, I saw the windows were smashed again and the door was kicked in. I pulled out my gun and shouted, "Police, come out with your hands up." No one answered. I called for the old man, but there was no response. I went inside and searched. The bedroom door was busted, and there was blood leading outside. It was clear someone had been dragged into the woods. I called for backup because I didn't want to go into the woods alone with a possible murderer. When backup arrived, we searched all night, but we couldn't find the old man. The next morning, we discovered him several miles into the woods with big bite marks covering his body. Someone or something had attacked and eaten him. The other officers talked about a cannibal in the woods, but I was starting to think the old man's story might be true. This creature had attacked him multiple times and eventually killed him. Humans can do terrible things, that's for sure, but the way the old man described this creature and the fact that he'd seen it more than once made me wonder. I feel responsible for what happened to him. I can't stop thinking about it, and being eaten alive is a horrible way to go. Nobody deserves that fate, especially not the old man. Believing in something strongly can make it feel real, especially to the person who believes it. And what happens when more people believe in it? Does it become even more real then? These are tricky questions that make me feel a bit uncertain about telling you this story, but hey, I'll give it a shot anyway. So there's this story that's been tagging along with me like a loyal shadow. It's got everything you'd find in an exciting adventure, surprises, dangers, and mysteries. And trust me, it's worth listening to. After encountering a strange creature, weird things started happening. Like those black cars always parked nearby, the static on my phone that sounds like something from a sci-fi movie, and even some shady characters peeking through my windows at night. But the scariest part? That was definitely seeing the creature itself. Just thinking about it makes my heart race. Back when I was younger, I was kind of reckless. Me and my friends, all 6 of us, were always chasing thrills in places we probably shouldn't have, and that's how we stumbled upon things we never should have messed with. Now, years later, those things are still hanging around like unwelcome guests at a party. I really wish they'd just disappear already. One time, me and 5 of my friends got this big idea. We wanted to explore the Old Asylum that closed down long ago. It was supposed to get a makeover into a hotel, but back then, it was just sitting there all spooky and abandoned. Nowadays, that place isn't filled with graffiti and scary stories. Nope, it's all fancy with tourists walking around and paintings on the walls that show cities way fancier than ours. When we snuck in, it was like stepping into a ghost town. People used to say something stayed behind in that hospital. Some thought the old patients never really left. Others believed a monster from a whole different world came to live there. The more tales we heard, the wilder they got. But you know what? Each of us had our own favorite story. Some of us thought there was an old inmate still hiding out, munching on rats. Others believed a demon got stuck there thanks to the devil himself. We argued about it a lot until that one unforgettable night. After that night, we stopped arguing about our favorite stories. The debates faded away, replaced by the cold reality of what we found. Urban legends can't hold a candle to the truth. We stumbled upon something that shook us to our core. Scratches on the floor like someone's fingernails had desperately clawed at the ground. They led us down a dark hallway, disappearing where a door had been covered up. So we did what curious kids do best. We broke through. The moment the drywall cracked, we knew we'd made a mistake. A putrid smell filled the air like something rotting. We froze as something reached out from the darkness beyond the hole. Fingers, long and gnarled, like a spider's legs, gripped the edges. It tore at the wall, widening the gap with ease. We couldn't tear our eyes away as it peered through, its massive eyes locking onto ours. Its lips parted, revealing rows of rotten teeth, whispering something that chilled us to the bone. Each of us heard our own name in that whispered refrain, and that was all it took for us to flee in terror. It chased after us, the sound of destruction echoing behind us. We screamed and cried, fearing for our lives like never before. We believed in the stories, but we never expected them to come to life. Were we to blame for awakening the monster with our belief? We escaped physically unharmed, but emotionally scarred. Our hearts raced with fear, knowing that we had unleashed something unimaginable. But the terror didn't end there. Men in black suits started watching us, their ominous presence a constant reminder of what we had done. They knew our secret, and they weren't about to let us forget it. Everywhere we went, they were there, lurking in the shadows. Were they waiting for us to make another mistake? Or were they waiting for the creature to catch up to us? Some days, it feels like we're nothing but bait for that thing we let loose. And the worst part, the asylum was renovated into a hotel, but the monster wasn't contained within its walls. It means the creature is out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike, and those men in black, they know it too. It's only a matter of time before the claws of fear reach out for us once again. I've lived in Daytona Beach, Florida, a place known for its stunning beaches and being called the shark capital of the world. I adore the ocean and surfing. Even though I've had a couple of close calls with sharks before, they were never too serious. But one day something happened that totally changed how I see things. On a regular day, I decided to go for an early morning surf. The sea was peaceful and welcoming as I paddled out to where the waves were breaking. I'd been surfing for about an hour when I spotted a big shadow moving towards me. At first, I thought it might be a dolphin, but as it drew closer, I realized it was much larger. As the creature surfaced, my heart raced. It was at least 3 times bigger than any shark I'd ever seen. I was stunned, not sure what to do. I tried to stay calm like they say to do in emergencies, but I was really scared. This shark looked like it could swallow me whole and still have room for dessert. Without thinking twice, I leaped off my board and left it behind, something I never thought I'd do. Panic set in as I paddled frantically towards the shore. I was convinced the shark was going to bite my leg off. Sure, I've seen sharks close to the shore before, but never one so huge. Losing my board was a real blow. It was a special gift from my mom for my birthday, and she worked hard to get it for me. I'll never forget the look on her face when she surprised me with it. I can't bear to tell her I lost it. She might still be making payments on it, and that thought haunts me. For the first time ever, I didn't feel the urge to surf. Losing my surfboard made me really upset, but it wasn't just that. Whenever I got near the water, my hands would shake and I'd feel sick. That big thing scared me so much I didn't know what to do. If I wasn't surfing, who was I? Every morning I'd come to the beach with my old, not-so-great board, hoping I'd find the courage to go back in the water, but I just couldn't do it. The thought of how close I came to something so dangerous, so deadly, was terrifying. It made me think differently about life. Maybe there's someone or something out there looking out for me. Most people wouldn't survive getting that close to such a huge shark. I told my friends who surfed about what I saw, but they didn't believe me. They said I was being silly or that they'd seen even bigger sharks. It turned into a silly competition, and no one took me seriously. I tried to explain that what I saw wasn't just a big shark. It had to be at least 60 feet long, but you know how guys can be. They always want to top each other's stories. I called my girlfriend at the time to tell her about it, but she said I was crazy. She cared more about my lost surfboard than the fact that I almost got hurt. Funny thing is, I'm dating her best friend now. Life sure is strange sometimes. As time passed, I felt more and more scared, and I couldn't bring myself to go back into the water, and I haven't surfed since that day. Seeing that huge shark made me feel like I wasn't as brave as I used to be. I'm not even sure if I'll ever swim in the ocean again. Just thinking about it makes me feel sick. Things just kept getting worse. I started having terrible nightmares. It always starts with me surfing on my old board, but something feels wrong. Then out of nowhere, that shark appears, just like in real life. It's terrifying. In my nightmares, the shark attacks me, tearing off my limbs. Sometimes I dream that my mom is surfing too, and the shark hurts her. I try to save her, but it's like I'm moving in slow motion. I feel so helpless and scared in those dreams. I wonder if I should talk to someone about it, like a therapist. Whenever I have those dreams, which happens way too much, I wake up feeling super scared. My sheets are all wet with sweat and I can't go back to sleep. I have to walk around the house to calm down. It's really making me feel like I'm losing my mind. I spent a lot of time searching online, trying to find out more about the creature I saw. Based on its size and what it looked like, I think it might have been a megalodon. I know it sounds crazy, but let me explain. Megalodons were huge sharks that lived a long time ago. They could grow up to 60 feet long. Even though they're supposed to be extinct, some people think they might still be out there in the deep ocean. People see them all the time, and who knows what's really going on down there. We haven't explored much of the ocean floor. If anyone has any other ideas, I'm all ears, but I've never heard of a real shark as big as the one I saw. The only explanation that makes sense to me is that it was a megalodon. When I was younger, my dad gave me a megalodon tooth for Christmas. Back then, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But now, I can't even look at it. It's sad because it's the only thing I have left to remember my dad by. This whole thing has been really scary and sad for me. A while back, I moved to Florida because of my job. I really like it here, especially because I don't have to deal with cold weather anymore. But boy, does it get super hot sometimes. Anyway, I enjoy exploring the outdoors here. There are tons of cool things to see, especially when I go hiking. One day, while I was out on a hike, I spotted something moving in the distance. At first, I thought it might be someone dressed up in a weird outfit, like maybe a hunter. But as it came closer, I realized it wasn't a person at all. Now listen, what I'm about to tell you might sound a little strange, but bear with me. This thing I saw was like it came from another planet. Imagine something you'd see in a Star Wars movie. It sort of reminded me of Cousin It from the Addams Family, but it was green and had glowing red eyes. It was covered in green leaves or something that hung down all the way to the ground. I couldn't believe my eyes. I kept blinking, thinking maybe I was seeing things, but nope, it was real, all right. Suddenly, the creature halted and locked its gaze onto me. Its eyes felt like they were drilling into my very soul, and I was filled with panic. My whole body tensed up as I tried to guess what it might do next. I couldn't budge, couldn't even look away, afraid that any sudden move could set it off. The silence around us was so intense, it felt like it was filling up the whole forest. My breaths came in short bursts, echoing in the quiet. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there, petrified, with the Moss Man just a few steps away. We both stayed motionless for what felt like forever, while my heart pounded like a drum. Then, in a flash, everything changed. The Moss Man, who had been eerily still just moments ago, suddenly sprang into action. It charged straight at me, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted away as fast as my legs could carry me. I could hear its heavy footsteps thundering behind me, and its breaths were like growls from a fierce beast. I sprinted as fast and as far as I could until I couldn't go on anymore. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, the creature was nowhere in sight. At first, I didn't tell anyone about what I saw, but I guess I was acting strangely, and my friend noticed. He took me out for some drinks to cheer me up. After a while, he asked me what was bothering me, and I spilled everything. It must have been an hour of me talking. At first, he just laughed, thinking I was joking, but when I explained how close I came to danger, he started to believe me. He suggested we go back and confront the creature, but I was adamant that I never wanted to return there again. That's when he mentioned the idea that it might have been a Bigfoot. That thought sent shivers down my spine. We were dealing with something truly mysterious and strange. That night, my friend stayed over at my place. We spent hours searching online, looking for any clues about what I had encountered, and then we stumbled upon something intriguing, a phenomenon known as the Moss Man, reported in our area. Reports described it as a humanoid figure covered in moss and leaves, and many people claim to have seen it over the years. Reading about these sightings both amazed and terrified us. It was a relief to know that I wasn't alone in witnessing something so strange. My friend's belief in my experience grew stronger as we dug deeper into our research, which was reassuring. I thought learning about the Moss Man would bring me closure, but instead, it made my mental health worse. I couldn't shake the thoughts of the creature from my mind. Nights became sleepless as I delved into books and watched videos about it, consumed by obsession. It changed me profoundly. As time passed, life slowly returned to normal, but I was never quite the same. They say ignorance brings happiness, and I understand the truth in that now. Often I find myself longing for the simple and joyful days before I encountered the Moss Man. Meeting the Moss Man changed me in ways I never expected. Before that night, I thought I had the world all figured out. I believed there was an explanation for everything, even the mysteries around us. People often share stories with you about their adventures as park rangers. Well, I've got one too. It all started about 6 years ago when I finished my degree in geology and landing my dream job as a park ranger at Auburn State Recreation Area in Northern California was so exciting. I've always loved being outdoors. My main tasks involved keeping the hiking trails in top shape. That meant making sure they were clear and safe for everyone to enjoy. I also had to tidy up the park by picking up trash and keeping the restrooms clean. Trust me, after a busy day at the park, those restrooms needed some serious attention. Another part of my job was supervising volunteers, which was always fun. But being the new ranger meant I often got assigned tasks that nobody else wanted to do. And for some reason, nobody wanted to take care of the museum house. The museum, called the Waller House, was a quaint historical building nestled within the park grounds. While I didn't consider myself a history enthusiast, I could appreciate its charm. Despite its small size and obvious age, it had a certain appeal. Looking at it closely, I could see that it needed some maintenance. Perhaps there wasn't enough money in the budget for updates, or maybe they were concerned about preserving its historical integrity, especially since it was built long before modern fire safety codes were established. I wasn't alone in being new to the park. There was another person, a friendly girl around my age, who worked as one of the museum's docents. Since we were both newcomers, we were responsible for opening and closing the museum during its operating hours. During the first week, everything went smoothly. I would meet Marlene, the other newbie, to unlock the museum doors. We made sure all the lights were on and nothing had been stolen or damaged. Those mischievous raccoons were always causing trouble. Then, I'd bid her farewell and continue with the rest of my day. After a few weeks, I started noticing that Marlene seemed a bit off whenever I arrived to help her lock up. I thought maybe it was because dealing with troublesome tourists could be frustrating. You wouldn't believe how many little kids see those do not touch signs as a personal challenge. As the fall season arrived, bringing with it earlier nights, Marlene's demeanor grew even more troubled during our lockup routine. One evening, I asked her if everything was okay. She responded with a shaky, "Sure," her voice sounding like it was about to crack from the tension. The following day, when the museum was set to open, I arrived with my keys, but Marlene was nowhere to be seen. I waited around for a while, but knowing how strict our boss was about punctuality, especially since the museum was quite popular despite its small size, I decided to give my boss a call to find out what was going on. "Hey there, is Marlene not feeling well today? I'm getting ready to open up the Waller house, but she's nowhere to be found." The voice on the other end of the line paused for a moment. "Actually, Marlene quit last night." I was surprised. She hadn't mentioned anything about leaving to me. What should I do then? "I'll need you to step in and cover for Marlene until we find someone else to help out." Well, I wasn't exactly thrilled about being inside instead of enjoying the outdoors, but as a park ranger, I knew that sometimes you have to do different tasks than usual. So I agreed. I hadn't really explored the museum much before. It used to be a house when the park was privately owned. Inside, there were exhibits showing what daily life was like back then. There were trunks filled with personal items like shoes and clothes, old books and newspapers, a bunch of antique buttons, farming tools, and my favorite, a fancy set of silverware. The silverware set was really something special. It was made of real silver and had these fancy handles with beautiful carvings on them. It was right in the middle of the room, placed just far enough inside that it caught people's attention, but still close enough to show it was important. As visitors started coming in, I had to answer questions and learned more about the museum by reading the information plaques near each exhibit. It used to be a carriage house, and the things on display belonged to the family who owned the land long ago, but there was one problem. It couldn't seem to keep warm. There was this strange cold spot right around the silverware set. Every time someone went up to look at it, they'd shiver. I decided I needed to investigate when I had a moment to spare. If there was something wrong with the heating, I had to make a note of it. As closing time rolled around, I headed over to the silverware display and immediately felt a chill run down my spine. Brr, it was cold. I couldn't figure out where the cold air was coming from, but it felt like I needed an extra layer of clothing just standing there. Then I heard it, a noise like something shutting, followed by what seemed like footsteps. I looked around quickly, but there was nothing to be seen. I made sure to write down the cold spot in my maintenance report before turning off the lights. Just as I flicked off the last switch, I heard those footsteps again. And then, believe it or not, I heard a whisper right by my ear. Leave me alone." Let me tell you, I bolted out of there faster than lightning. I was still shaking outside when another park ranger pulled up. "Hey, everything all right?" He took one glance at me and shook his head. "Looks like you've met Nancy." "Who's Nancy?" I asked, my heart still racing. Nancy Caldwell was a young lady who came all the way from the east to marry one of the sons of the landowner. Sadly, she got sick with cholera and passed away before her wedding. You know that fancy silverware set I liked so much? Well, that was part of her dowry. It seemed like every docent who left within a couple of weeks talked about feeling uneasy. The other ranger told me about Nancy. He didn't think she was dangerous, but she liked hanging out near the silver set and sometimes caused a little trouble. She'd move things around, whisper to people, and spook visitors she didn't like. I asked, "What should I do? I'm filling in until we find another docent." "We've had lots of docents, but there was one who stayed a long time. She said Nancy liked people with manners." The next morning, when it was time to open, I knocked on the museum door before going in. "Excuse me, good morning, Miss Nancy. I'm opening up now. Please don't startle me." Did I feel silly talking to nobody? Maybe a little. But did it help? Mostly. Sometimes I felt like someone was standing beside me when there wasn't anyone there, and I'd hear footsteps when no one was around. I'd also say good morning when I opened and, "Good night, Miss Nancy. Have a nice evening. I'll be back tomorrow," when I closed at night. I guess it worked, because sometimes I'd sense something in the room with me, or things would be moved overnight, but I never got really scared. I filled in as a docent for 2 weeks until we found someone new. But before going back to my trail work, I made sure to tell the new person how to handle our museum's other inhabitant.